Hello, everyone. Thank you so much to our panelists for being here today, and thank you to our audience for joining us. My name is Rachel Lynn Weaver. I'm the curator of the Cinema Reset program here at the New Orleans Film Festival. Cinema Reset showcases virtual reality, extended reality, and interdisciplinary kinds of media, basically works that maybe don't live on the screen or in theaters alone. And the projects we feature are free and open to the public. They're at the cutting edge of creativity, storytelling, fine art, and technology. And today it's my great pleasure to moderate a discussion amongst an outstanding group of folks who've created projects featured in the virtual reality and 360 program of the film festival this year. So to start us out, panelists, I'd love to have you introduce yourselves. So if you could share your name, your role, and the project that you have in the festival. So we'll start maybe with you, Casey.
Okay. My name is Casey Koizan. I'm a Plicho Dene interdisciplinary artist and interdisciplinary musician. My project is called Wanaze Keoke See Visions, and I am the project lead and character modeler for the short film project, etc.
Great, thank you. Peter, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Peter Decherney. I'm the co-director for the docu-series, The Heart of Puerto Rico, and there are, I think, 6 different episodes from it being shown at the festival.
Katrina.
Hi, I'm Katrina Sorrentino. I'm a fine artist and filmmaker, and I'm the co-director of The Curious Life of Belmont.
Wonderful. And we'll jump over to you, Andrea, as well.
Perfect. My name is Andrea Patino. I am also a filmmaker and a video journalist. I'm the co-director with Katrina of The Curious Life of Belmont.
Brian.
Hello, my name is Brian Andrews. I'm a visual technologist and storyteller, and I am the writer, producer, conceiver of Hominidae, a CG animated 360.
And Samantha.
Hi, my name is Samantha Quick. I'm a digital artist, and I'm the director of Utah.
And finally, Amy.
Hey, I'm Amy Nelson. I'm a filmmaker and immersive storyteller, and I'm the director, editor of Arbain Walk.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for those introductions. So to start us out, I'm going to ask a few questions of the entire group. And the way this will work is you can choose to respond if you want, or if you wish to pass, you can pass. But I'm going to just ask some sort of general questions, and then we'll kind of open into a more free-form discussion. So to begin, for people who are first coming to your filmmaking or creative practices, could you say a couple of things about your project featured in the festival, maybe its themes and motivations? And whoever wants to go first can begin.
Okay. So our project really relates a lot to it's more of like a dreamscape kind of feel, and we draw a lot of inspiration from the stories and legends and myths from the Northwest Territories that revolve around a lot of the animals and spiritual practices of not only Canada's Indigenous people, but our practices within the Northwest Territories specifically. And we're just really pushing for that kind of dreamscape kind of feel within the prototype that we have showing right now, and then going into the various chapters in the future.
Fantastic, thank you. So maybe Samantha, do you want to talk about Utah a bit?
Yeah, so Utah was a partnership with a nonprofit in the Philippines that builds boats for children who have to swim long distances to get to school. So I went and visited one of the yellow boat communities, did a lot of documentation for our animators because the logistics of actually shooting there were close to impossible. And we decided to make it in the style of like a Pixar animated short because there's no dialogue and there are a lot of different dialects in the Philippines and across Asia. We wanted to make sure that we could maximize the potential people who could watch our film, especially because people who own VR headsets, like that's such a small portion anyway. And yeah, it's a story about a girl. It's based on a girl that I actually met while I was there, who wanted to be a scientist and inventor, and she wanted to build things for her community. So it follows Jeremy, the main character, as she's trying to find a way to invent a better commute to school with her little brother. And I really wanted to showcase like the feelings of community building, and we're sort of all in this together, and just like the love and appreciation they have for one another and how they prioritize that above everything.
Amazing, thank you. Amy, can you speak a bit to your work as well? Oh, I think you're muted.
Hey, thanks. Arbaeen Walk is it's a 3-part kind of series. It's a series of 3 videos that follow pilgrims as they walk from Najaf to Karbala, Iraq. In a pilgrimage known as Arbaeen, it's the largest peaceful gathering of people in the world. And the year I went, it was like 30 million people. Wow. So I had gone on that pilgrimage anyway, like in 2014. And when I went, I was just really, it's very kind of intense, overwhelming experience on a sensory level. And I felt like a film or an audio piece in that setting wouldn't really capture it the way I felt like it needed to be told. So when I learned about 360, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the medium. So I'd been planning for it for a couple of years out, and so it's basically just a story that is a compilation of a lot of different interviews and stories from pilgrims and people that we meet along the way, kind of explaining what it means to them today in the world. And so my goal was to, through multiple perspectives and kind of like a multifaceted, also kind of sensory experience, you would come away with an impression of what this might feel like. So even though you can't go, maybe my goal was to get as close as possible to kind of like the experience, so that people could feel like they were there. So that was my my kind of main goal for it. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you.
Hmm.
Brian, share some info for us about Hominidae.
Yeah, so on the surface, Hominidae may seem very different than the projects already talked about, as it's takes place in an animated X-ray world where you can see sort of internal anatomies of various humans that have evolved into fantastic forms. But really within that, it's a film about seeing the humanity in others that otherwise would seem monstrous to ourselves. And sort of within a very hostile world, really a mother just raising her young and trying to survive.
Amazing. Andrea and Katrina, I'll let you sort of figure out how to introduce your project to us.
Yeah, and I just wanted to quickly acknowledge some familiar faces, Sam and Amy. It's lovely to see you, and lovely to see everyone else. Yeah, The Curious Life of Beaumont was part of the VR for Good Fellowship with Oculus, and we also partner with a nonprofit in Halifax, Canada, which is a senior living facility called Northwood. And Katrina and I went there to visit first. We did a 3-week kind of pre-production trip. And I think, Katrina, you feel free to jump in whenever, but I think when we went there and being with a lot of folks that we met, we felt very challenged in a lot of our conceptions of aging and kind of preconceived ideas. And we really wanted to capture that through the film. And Katrina, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about Bill and why we ended up working with him.
Yeah, we just wanted to, we were partnering with the Senior Community Center in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and one of the overwhelming sensations that we felt when we were there was this palpable sense of life and community and laughter and humor, and we just quickly made friends with a group of people there. But we had kept hearing about this man named Bill Mott. Oh, you have to meet Bill Mott, you have to meet Bill Mott. And he was 89 at the time that we began filming, and running like 4 entrepreneurial pursuits and dreaming up another. So we decided to tell his story to sort of exemplify our feelings surrounding ageism in our society and our Western culture, to kind of challenge those notions.
Thank you. And Peter.
Yeah, so our film is a VR docuseries. It features over a dozen artists in Puerto Rico, and we were trying to help amplify their stories about work they created after Hurricane Maria, and really talking about it and engaging with it from a range of perspectives, thinking about climate change refugees and just their own personal experiences of the hurricane, trying to think about the long history of hurricanes in Puerto Rico's history, but probably trying to think about sovereignty and colonialism was the thread that united them. I'm really sort of excited by the way that VR was able to not just show you their art, but take you into the creative process in a way I don't think other media are able to.
That's a really good point, and kind of also segues to another question that I have sort of related to that, which is, sort of wondering why immersive media, why 360, why VR for each of you. And some of you have already touched on this and sort of answered that, but Peter, can you go into that a little bit more, perhaps?
Yeah, so I've been making VR films for the last 5 years or so, while still making, traditional flat documentaries as well, flatties as we like to call them now. And there are, things people have often talked about, which is the ability to give someone presence in a space and to create empathy with characters who have volume, and to allow viewers to have a wider experience and a different kind of experience each time they view a project, which is not to say you record everything and they can see everything. There's still a tremendous amount of authorship that goes into it. And I've mostly worked on projects that deal with global migration, mostly in Africa. This project in a way is a little bit of a departure from other work that I've done. But for me, it was actually the New York Times headline after Hurricane Maria that said half of Americans didn't know that Puerto Rico was part of the United States. That made me think this was a story to tell and could be able to connect people with artists that became artists in Puerto Rico. And in general, I feel like what I've done with VR is try to take individuals who are sort of caught up in larger political, social issues that we talk about and think about sometimes demographically or abstractly, and just humanize them, individualize them, which film does kind of generally, but I think VR does, even more.
Mm-hmm. So maybe sort of going back in the order that we started out in, or something close to that. So Andrea and Katrina, can you also speak a little bit more to the choice of VR in this particular work?
Yeah, I mean, we were part of a grant with Oculus and Facebook called VR for Good, but I think the medium of VR was really compelling for this project specifically, because unless you have a family member or a friend in a senior living center, these are kind of tucked away spaces in society that you wouldn't otherwise visit and go to. And so just being in that space and seeing life, happen around you, I believe was a powerful medium for that subject. And Andrea, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
No, I think just we really wanted to capture what we felt. We both felt very intense feelings the first time we visited. It was very, very striking. And we kind of, what VR gives you to be present, I think was very helpful in our attempt to capture that in the film, I think.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to jump to Sam, actually, with regards to Lutah. I feel like there's an intersection sort of thematically with the desire to, to sort of educate and illuminate. Did you find the medium sort of specifically helps in that way?
I think that if this were in a different context, like on YouTube or, uploaded as a Facebook video, it probably wouldn't have the same level of like eye-catching, like you want to watch it. I I love the idea of like actually being in like a 3D constructed space. Our art director, Ruby Wang, did a really, really beautiful job designing the world. And while we weren't able to film there, so you don't have that sense of like immediate access, we did make a very concerted effort and put a lot of time into picking up details from the island in terms of like local patterns, sounds, birds, plants. We paid really careful attention to the birds, especially there, because they're right next to a bird sanctuary. We looked at a lot of Filipino artists and folk musicians to inspire the score. So there's still the intensity of world building, I think, hits you on a much more visceral level in VR versus a traditional flat medium. But like Andrea and Katrina, I was also part of the VR for Good cohort. And the way that works is they basically pair you with a nonprofit. They don't tell you until you get there. And at that point, it's really just a matter of making it work. So I took what I knew about immersive media and especially VR storytelling as far as what works, what doesn't, how to set up the stage, how to orient the characters. We drew a lot from like blocking in plays and how in plays, how do the characters move around the stage and the audience. And we were able to craft a narrative that way that we thought we were really doing the story justice in VR using everything we knew about the techniques that it
Amy, let's transition to you now.
Okay. I spoke a little bit about it before, I guess. I think this is a great medium for, because we know from research that it is really great with creating impressions. It's more of an impressionistic medium. And it allows a lot of agency gives a lot of agency to the learner to kind of direct their own narrative, kind of mini narrative, micro narrative within the larger narrative that the director's created. I like the kind of empowerment of the medium on that level. I also, my piece, I used, a little bit of ambisonic, like spatialized media, audio. And I feel like, audio is always, I feel in filmmaking, something that's always like not spoken about enough. And my background is really like an NPR. So I have like more of a audio first background. So it's really important for me to really get that right. So I feel like spatialized audio in a 360 space is just, obviously it's something that you can't get unless you're like in a movie theater and you have surround sound or something like that. But, I think the idea of bringing in that ambisonic sound also, if you don't have headsets, if you're just using like a handheld, it helps to kind of bridge that gap of not being fully immersed like in a headset. So like if you have spatialized audio, it, I think it immerses you even more. And so that was definitely something that I felt was a necessary piece for my experience. Yeah. So I hope that
Thank you. Let us now hear from Brian about the decision to work in VR and 360.
Yeah, so I've actually worked with the hominid creatures several times throughout my career. They were first developed way back in 2006 as photo composites of human and veterinary X-rays, just sort of exploring this idea of alternative human evolutionary forms. Then in 2012, I made a flatty as well in this world, really exploring how biology can drive storytelling. And I've always wanted to make sort of a larger short, and was actually struggling with the storytelling. It wasn't really coming together until I started getting involved in VR for a completely unrelated project. And once I sort of really got a taste of many of the themes that people have already brought up here, the empathetic ability that VR brings out, the direct physical embodiment, it just clicked and it made sense that, in order to occupy the same physical space as these unique anatomies and creatures, really created that empathetic opportunity of, with what would seem monstrous that otherwise wasn't necessarily working within a traditional 2D film.
Gotcha. So Casey, your work also is sort of driven by this need to visualize maybe cultural elements that we wouldn't normally have the ability to see in this particular way. And so sort of similarly to Brian, you are using this medium in a way that kind of takes us into an extended or expanded reality. Can you speak to that and the choice of 360?
Well, we felt that it was something like, with me and Travis, it's just a small 2-person team, and we're both somewhat new to VR and 360 and that way of creating. We felt that the vulnerability aspect of VR was important for this, because it's so powerful that it allows you to put someone right in the middle of your creation, right? Where they can be completely surrounded with your idea and your aesthetic, as opposed to like just a flat screen. So you can kind of communicate these sort of cultural elements a bit more effectively. And it just seemed to be the medium that we can kind of expand with those ideas on. And we also kind of felt obligated to do, not really obligated, but it was a choice that to create in this way, because nothing within the Northwest Territories had been created like that before. There's been some 360 video kind of projects that have been done, but nothing really created in this way, where it brings in these like digitally created elements and cultural backgrounds and that sort of thing. So it's a new way to tell our stories and communicate our experiences with the landscape and the animals.
It's very powerful, you know, to be able to, and I think this is true for all of you, to be able to sort of evoke these immersive spaces, these spaces that otherwise people would not be able to place themselves into. Do you feel like the medium is freeing to you? Is it limiting? Where are places of tension and opportunity for you in working in 360 and VR in particular? And I'm just going to kind of open this question up, and whoever wants to respond can respond.
I guess I'll continue. So the limiting factors of creating in this way to us is we're still new to like Unity and Unreal and that sort of thing. So that seems to be a limitation that we're faced with right now, is just our limited knowledge at this point. But it's really exciting to realize that, you know, the more that we get involved in this, the more that we learn, the more powerful and visually appealing and the audio and sound could be more effective. Like, I'm more of the artistic creator, and Travis creates the landscapes and works with binaural audio. He's more of an audio engineer, so he's really excited to really expand on those experimental forms of audio to really push this sort of dreamlike atmosphere. So it's kind of like we're sitting on the edge of our seats, just like waiting to kind of jump at it again. But dollar bills is something that kind of like makes things work sometimes. So we're kind of just like waiting on this big grant to go through, and then we can pick back up and start developing chapter 2 or chapter 1, I guess.
Amazing. Other thoughts about limitations and freedoms, maybe?
Just to pick up on. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, I'll pick up on what Casey was saying. Oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna exactly. No, that's what I was gonna say too. I wanted to piggyback off of Casey, because I really like what you said, Casey, just about just the freeing part that I resonated with that you said is just the possibilities and the experimentation, the opportunities for exploration and really problem solving in this medium is really super exciting to me. And figuring out how to tell stories in this space is very different than, traditional audio or, documentary audio or documentary filmmaking or even narrative, just because you have so many competing elements within the space, and you're only able as a learner, as a user, to kind of absorb so much, right? So if you populate the space with too much narration and too much this all at the same time, it's like an overload. So I think like that fine tuning and that kind of dance of trying to figure out that that rhythm within the storytelling space is really exciting. One of the limitations that is really frustrating to me, I kind of feel like I have a love-hate thing with VR and 360 because I love it for the reasons I just mentioned, but also the limitations of the accessibility for the most people, you know, and I don't think that the people who are putting out the hardware are really thinking about a human first platform. They're not thinking about how people are already using digital media in this current ecosystem. And, you know, if you can bring something really cool and introduce it, but if people aren't already using it in their lives or it doesn't make sense to them, it's really not going to be adopted, I don't think, in a way that people want it to be adopted. So I think you need to work from what people are already using and work out from there. And so like, that's why I was very intentional about making mine a handheld device experience, because I wanted to be as shareable as possible. I wanted to be like a social media kind of 360 kind of thing, because I was doing it for my community and I wanted it to be something for my community that could be shared amongst not just my community, but like also other people too. But I knew that it was a limitation for people to access the story because of that. So I was like, well, I'm gonna make this more like something that people can just watch on a playlist. So
understandable. Other thoughts? Peter, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the exact same two things. One is that, you know, both the exciting, one of the exciting elements of working in VR and 360 and the limitation is that we don't have a grammar and style for storytelling. And even a lot of the ways we're used to telling stories two-dimensionally actually don't work. And we have to unlearn things like we thought were jump cuts and were mistakes. One example is just, you know, I'm not creating things in Unity, I'm recording things with cameras. And it's just a question of how high to place the camera. It turned out to be really fascinating. And so, you know, we talked about the sense of embodiment you have. And so if you put the camera too low, you might feel like you're a child, or too high, a viewer would feel like they were floating. And so our initial instinct was put it at kind of average human height and people would adjust. And that actually turned out not to be the right answer, because it's also the sense of empathy that's important. And what you really want is the eye level of the subject, and it helps put you in their perspective rather than thinking about your own sense of presence in the space. And then once we had that rule, we realized we broke that all the time as well. So I think one of our most powerful scenes is when you're with Anomalia, the drag performer, and you're in the bathroom with her, and it's very personal. A lot of people actually take off the headset at that moment because they feel like it's too personal. But then other people look down and she's like 6'5" or more, and then they look down, they realize they've never been that far from the sink, and also will take off the headset because they feel too high and unstable. And then the other thing that Amy said is talking about accessibility. And you know, on the one hand, one of the things that got me really excited about VR was Oculus and some of the really high-end technology that was coming out and being developed around the platform. But the other thing that got me excited was the New York Times working with YouTube VR and the ability for anyone with a cell phone to be able to have some experience of 360. And I feel like those are still pretty far apart, those two experiences. And so we tried to create versions that could be experienced in 8K with 3D and ambisonic sound, but also just on a phone. And I hope one day those things come together.
I wanted to jump in, also echo what everyone has said already, but one of the things that we learned while we were at Northwood, which is the senior living facility we're working with, they were using a lot of VR themselves, even before we came in with the project, and they were using it to see how patients with Alzheimer's and dementia would respond to it, which they were really excited by. And also because a lot of the seniors there can no longer travel to faraway places. They had one film where someone had gone to Halifax and recorded just spaces in nature that were famous, or that that a lot of the seniors liked, but they could no longer go to. And it was just kind of long shots of those spaces. And a lot of them really, really enjoyed that and were responding really well. And to us, I think that was really, really exciting to see how those, the potential that a medium like that has. However, like Amy has said, like Peter said, obviously it's not an accessible technology to that community either, right? Like difficult to manage. A lot of them just, it just had to be mediated by somebody of the staff who could like put it on them and whatnot. So obviously that to us was also kind of frustrating as well, as we were creating this film, right? Because we wanted them to see it and to explore it. And I think I very much share the same feelings, Amy, that you have, the love-hate relationship in that sense, because it feels like there's so much potential, but it feels terribly exclusive in many, many ways, right? And that is, we just really need to figure out how to break that.
I mean, if I could come on that, I think also what's happening, because VR has been around for a while for that exclusive group, that audience is now developing, and they are actually beginning to develop a language and become familiar with the medium, whereas the vast majority of other people are not. And so now when I see my work presented in festivals, there's this very sophisticated group which already seems to look at some of this stuff as like old school. Whereas a much larger population, need to learn the grammar, the methods, how to experience these things. And so yes, there's a growing divide in terms of audience perception.
Yeah, I think there's so much to be said about this question of democratization. And we, at least in the Cinema Reset program and the New Orleans Film Festival, we really are interested in democratizing access to these tools. For example, we're conceptualizing this educational program that involves outreach and engagement with VR technology for underserved communities. We're providing content that is free and open to the public in its current state. Normally that would be in an in-person space where people come in and actually have fully immersive experiences and try out different types of headsets and kind of contend with the fully enveloping experience versus like the web-based sort of limitations that we're navigating currently. But, I'm curious about, especially at this moment where the medium is sort of becoming more familiar. It's like been around long enough to where 360 projects are not completely novel anymore. It's integrated into Facebook. It's available on YouTube. Vimeo can accommodate 360. It's easy for us to access 360 content. But of course, like getting to the place of participating in cultural production is such a different step. And so I'm curious about how you all landed in working in this medium, as especially for those of you who've been, who are new to it, or for those of you who have been doing it for a while. Like if you wanted to guide a young or underprivileged filmmaker or somebody who didn't have access to a lot of tools, who was curious about working in this way, like where would they begin? And this is always a question that I feel like I want to respond to this because of the communities that I'm serving.
Right. The tools thing is hard. So 6 months ago, I did some consulting work with a documentary group working with Chicago Public Schools, specifically converting, working with students to see if script ideas can be converted into VR or VR type storytelling projects. And I mean, the challenge is, the fact is the tools aren't good for the professionals yet. They're still being, you're still having to hack things together. You're still having to really kind of have a lot of technical knowledge and navigate and build your own workflows. So to expect sort of a lot of those higher level things to happen with people who already have limited tool access is absolutely challenging. And so what we actually found out is just to really kind of adjust expectations and adjust sort of goals, and the idea of getting a full Unity, 6 DOF experience in that situation is difficult. But getting people access to a GoPro Fusion, which is relatively significantly inexpensive, and just getting in their hands and getting to interact, proved to be really wonderful, because there also aren't these boundaries of storytelling aren't defined the way they are, right? a new user or a user who doesn't have experience the way like a professional filmmaker does is still on the same level, right? Because the professional filmmaker doesn't actually know necessarily any better how the story is going to work. So in that sense, there really is a lot of opportunity. But we still, everybody has to overcome the technical challenges. And then real quick, I guess to your question is how did I come to this? Is, just sort of as a researcher working with some of my colleagues, VR was becoming hot again. It was a thing, and we just decided we needed to learn. And so I got together with my colleagues and we shot a narrative short, sort of a horror short, because we figured, well, if we make mistakes, it's horror and we can cut around it and, add blood splatters or darkness or whatever. And we ended up creating an odd film that had to get edited like 4 different times because we had no idea what we were doing and had to readjust and readjust and readjust. And while that film is interesting, all of the people who worked on that film have now moved on to make much more accomplished directed VR projects because we were able to sandbox it out just through experimentation, which I guess I should say is the other way to do it. The other way to teach and be democratic is to sandbox it with people.
I think it's totally doable. Like if you, just like Brian was saying, get your hands on some like old, well, you can't use really like the Samsung Gear 360 anymore because they don't even like make them or develop the software for it anymore, but they're like really low consumer level cameras. I think like there are definitely some very basic principles that we all know from storytelling in 360 that you can ground people in, like whether it's through public school kind of outreach or doing some kind of after school program. And there's very simple editing tools as well. I think it's more important to help people understand the different languages cinematic languages that you can use in this medium. And it may actually be more intuitive for a younger generation actually to see and to experiment and to kind of dream in this kind of landscape. And I just think I think the big headsets and the big cameras and the Unity and the Unreal, like just leave that for now. Just giving people a very simple camera that can be accessed through an app on their phone, and understanding what to do and not to do in 360. And even I taught a class at CDS, a Center for Documentary Studies, recently called Poetry in 360, where everybody brought a poem, because poetry is an impressionistic type of literary form, and it pairs well with 360. And just having them cut a few shots together, or voice their own, and just talk about like POV, like first person versus ghost in the room kind of thing, and then pushing it out, exporting it out, and watching it on their phone. Like, I think that's very exciting for people. I don't think it has to get really fancy.
I would just also agree with that. I teach in the spring a VR class at the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm just planning to teach it as an online course. And I really love for students to have access to cutting edge technology and being able to use professional equipment. And we can't do that this spring. Actually, we couldn't do it last spring either, but we had to pivot in the middle of the semester. And I've been getting really excited by the Insta360 cameras and the Insta360 software. And as Amy was saying, actually using the lower end technology as a way to let the technology disappear for the students and let them think about telling stories in 360, and also using 360 capture as a way to create new forms of flat, rectangular storytelling that wasn't possible without 360 cameras. It's and these are cameras that I tend to think of as being more action cameras, sports cameras, and not storytelling devices. And not for creating art, but I think actually they're going to. In some ways, it might be better than what we would have envisioned without the limitations of having to teach remotely.
Right. Sam, you were going to say something.
Yeah, so I was part of the Daily 360 at the New York Times, where we did a video every day of breaking news events around the world. And we paired with people from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different photojournalists. And we actually, I have it right here, we gave them all these tiny Samsung cameras, which I don't think they support any longer, but there's a few nice things about them. The dual lenses, because they have such a wide field of view. They're unlike the 3D VR cameras, which do a lot of clipping. You get much closer to your subject, which when you're doing any kind of interview or you have any kind of talking head on camera is really important because you want to feel some sense of closeness. They're also really, really good for tight spaces. Because the camera is so small, we were able to do things with it that we wouldn't have tried otherwise. I think we put it on the back of an eagle, we put it inside of a bee, like a beehive. And so I found this to be like a really freeing tool, especially when considering like, what could you do with a camera, which you would never risk doing any of those things if you were working with a huge device. As far as interactive content, like building things in Unity and Unreal are both free, and there's a lot of really good tutorials on how to use them, but it really depends on more on like what you're interested in. Are you more interested in filmmaking? Are you a programmer? Are you interested in 3D art? Any job that you have in Unity or Unreal Engine, you're not going to be doing the whole thing yourself. You're going to be working with a team. All of these skills are highly specialized. So I think it's really, really difficult for one person to sit there and make a video game from start to finish. Some people have done it. There are outliers, but it's incredibly, incredibly difficult.
Yeah, the auteur model doesn't work very well in this era.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge for sure. And the few video games that I have seen that were made by one person, they're usually like quite low poly, and they still take years. I mean, games and interactive content that way, they're just so complex. And I actually came from a digital art background. I studied computer art in college and animation, and I became interested in VR that way because, well, I actually initially noticed the power of video games. Even like if you spend a lot of time like looking at the screen, like interacting with this 3D world, you start to dream in 3D. You become so immersed in your game that you actually forget about your surroundings. And so I wanted to play with VR and build content for those worlds. And it was after that I started working with the New York Times and doing more film-based virtual reality content.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot that we can bounce off of here, but I kind of wonder if you have any questions for one another also, or if like subjects that we've kind of touched on or that we've sort of started to discuss here, if there are things that kind of have stood out to each of you that maybe we could dive deeper into.
I'd love to go back to Amy's point about sound, because it really struck me when I was watching your piece. It was one of the first things that kind of really got to me, and it makes sense. And I knew I had forgotten, but I knew that you had a radio background. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and the importance of audio and how what that process was like for you.
Are you talking to me, Andrea?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah, well, I just used the Zoom H2N, so I didn't even do like full-on spatialized audio the way, like, for example, the teams I'm working with now, it's completely different. It's really ambient spatialized audio. I actually did my interviews with a regular, I didn't use the Zoom, I used a Sony PCM just to do my interviews, and then I kind of, so I have, I'm mixing both, multi-channel and also like stereo, mono. So there's different layers, and then I have music in it as well. I knew that, one of my deficits was that's the camera I used. One that Samantha just was holding up was the Samsung Gear 360 2016, which doesn't even do 4K. So I knew that I would have limitations. I didn't even shoot it in 4K. I think I shot in 2.5K, 3K. Completely by accident, which is terrible because you go all the way to Iraq and okay. But anyway, it all worked out. But I really saw the like I said before, the audio as a kind of compensation, and there's just so much that you can use there. I feel like the spatialization and kind of the 360 sound to me is even more important in establishing a space. The thing is when you do create something that's handheld, you can't guarantee that people are going to use their earbuds to watch it. A lot of people are just like bringing it up, so that's one of my challenges with this piece is, so that's why I created this little slide at the beginning, like, remember your headphones. But I think that there's just a lot of possibility. I'm sure a lot of you have seen like Notes on Blindness, which is such a great piece, audio first kind of piece. And I feel like audio really does something that the video cannot do in terms of bringing you into the inner consciousness of the people around you, or if you're doing first person POV, of the person who is telling the story, or who you're embodying, in a way that is, like, right now, for example, I'm working on a piece. We're actually really pushing hard to hit this deadline, a piece about elders and social isolation. It's for the elder care industry. And so our protagonist is all VO. So we do have some sound attached to game objects also, like in the phone, like people kind of texting back and forth, or, him leaving a voice note, and then, that's attached to the phone, or the message coming in is attached to the phone. So you have kind of spatialized sound that's attached to game objects, which it just makes it more realistic. And I think it really just adds to the embodiment, especially if you're in a first person POV experience. It's really necessary. You can't just get away with like stereo mono, like all in head sound. You've got to work with the dimensions of the space. Yeah.
For sure. And I feel like there's something about, sound as a medium in particular has this miraculous kind of ghostly absence and simultaneous presence that is so transcendent and transformative. And I feel like for a number of you, you're working to create not just visual atmosphere, but sonic atmosphere. Casey, for example, like the sort of like droning musical content for your work, the sort of like movement into a transcendent sonic space, or Brian, like the environment.
Yeah, we thought a lot about that. I actually came from a very visual space, but I had some really incredible audio team to work with. And at the heart of the film, well, first of all, there's an X-ray world visually. So we tried to figure out, well, what would that mean auditorially? How does sound carry through environments? But at the heart of the film, there's the song, right? The song that the mother sings to her children when they're first born, and then spoiler alert, when they sing back to her as she passes away in their arms. And in order to get that performance, we wanted to have this idea of transparency with sound, which normally you wouldn't get because everything was visually transparent. And so we ended up doing that with a lot of really complicated miking. So, first of all, our performer was incredible, and she had to sing this song in an invented language that doesn't exist, but still hit the subtext and all these things that carry the story. But we recorded it in a traditional recording studio and ended up doing lots of mic placements, not just for her vocals, but on her body, right? So to try to just be able to capture and then spatialize all these other kinds of bodily sounds that would typically be too subtle and not come through, that we were then able to actually, because it's in there, spatialize in the VR experience and let those mix, so that you actually would get not just breath, but potentially even heartbeat and body rustling and all those things. And again, to let that carry through in an auditorily transparent way.
Yeah, I think there's so much potential there. Amy, were you going to add something?
I just wanted to ask, I was just curious about Casey's project. I haven't seen it yet, and I wanted to understand his use of sound in the kind of dreamscape landscape that he was talking about, and his like kind of learning, his discoveries, or what he learned in that space, in that creative space.
Okay, so within our project, it was kind of like pieced together with Travis and I, utilizing our limited knowledge of VR and Unity and that sort of thing. The soundscape within Unaza Kyoke it's not binaural. It is a stereo mono soundscape, unfortunately, but it fits. The soundscape is actually the introductory composition from my EP that I released in 2018 as Naga. It's a composition called Lakeside. It was inspired by the time that I spend in my mom's cabin outside of Yellowknife in Northwest Territories. So it's like quite remote. I was recording samples of loons that were on the lake, and it kind of just gives me that like warm feeling, like I'm home, I'm back in my territory and that sort of thing. and we were trying to figure out what we were going to do for audio or create something. And within the editing process, because I dropped it into Premiere once I was like putting everything together, and it just sort of seemed to fit. Like it had this droning sort of ethereal sort of feeling to it, and then syncing up some of the cut scenes with some of the transitions within the song as well. It just made it all work. So we're kind of happy with how that turned out. But naturally going forward for the next chapter, it'll be like fully binaural audio. There'll be objects that emit sound and that sort of thing. But we just wanted to have something that was going to represent the North in a way that it fit within the whole sort of aesthetic and idea of the project itself.
That's a wonderful sort of explanation. Thank you so much, Casey. I'm curious about also sort of this moment that we are in. Here we are, sort of all virtually connecting with one another remotely. I would love to be at the film festival in a roundtable discussion with you, and yet because of COVID, we're sort of navigating this distance. And so many of your works are quite intimate in a way. Like there's an intimacy to the documentary pieces, to the kinds of personal journeys that we're taken on, to these dreamscapes that we're brought into. Like I'm curious about how your work is changing right now, whether it's changing, and how you see that evolution moving forward.
Yeah, I think this time has provided a lot of introspection. I mean, I'm used to getting in my head and being moody as an artist, but it's really enabled that a lot. And at least for me personally, I think what will be generated is a lot more personal essay work moving forward. A lot of things where I put my own experience more forward in the work versus filming, working with other communities. And I've started to conduct interviews like this over Zoom for a documentary I'm working on. So it's interesting, like there are limitations, but one of my art teachers during my master's always said, set parameters, because when you set parameters, you'll be able to have a way forward. If it's just all open, it's like almost too much freedom. So I've been trying to use quarantine to give myself parameters to move forward.
I also think there's a lot of room for collaboration. I'm work as a journalist. I do video in a documentary team and do a lot of immigration related work. And I would otherwise be probably outside filming right now. But for example, one of the greatest and most important pieces that I've done happened during COVID, in the sense that it felt like a true collaboration. We were working with an undocumented family. They were filming themselves for 4 months, and it's something that we had never done. It was, they filmed themselves with their phones, and the entire family participated, and they were really excited about it. And then I was the editor. But it really, truly felt, in the years that I've been doing this work, kind of as a true collaboration in that sense. The woman that was kind of leading the mother was super excited about it. And I really saw that as an opportunity really to kind of, create more work in that way, in that sense that I think feels more like an even field in that sense, right? Within the two of us, it felt like a more honest collaboration. And I really, really enjoyed that and appreciated that process.
I'd just like to speak to this a bit. So I'd like to echo the kind of like collaboration aspect of it. I feel that it's a really powerful thing, and it's kind of like the next step for a lot of developers right now. In regards to COVID, I experienced something that was really interesting, but I felt that it really helped with the health aspect of it, mental health and that sort of thing. Because when COVID hit, in March, there was a few weeks there where there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of like physical things that I was involved in, exhibits and travel naturally was all canceled. And there was this like impending weight that was sort of happening. It kind of felt like things were kind of getting tight, and you could feel a lot of tension within society in general. And I felt so glad within this one aspect that Travis influenced me to download No Man's Sky VR. And there was an instance when I jumped in my spaceship and I left the planet, and it was like, peace out, Earth. Like, I'm going to leave all this problem kind of like here and I'll come back. But for now, like, I'm going to go into outer space and kind of just like free my mind a little bit. So it was a really interesting sort of thing that happened, you know, and it made me feel better, you know, in a way. Or hopping into, you know, programs like either Tilt Brush or Masterpiece VR or something like that, it allows you to kind of forget your surroundings, as Samantha mentioned. Like, there's this, I don't necessarily like the word escapism, but it's kind of what it is, right? Like, you become so immersed in something else. It's like playing a video game or watching a movie where it allows you to live someone else's life for a while and to kind of like be at peace with the harsh realities of the world. So maybe my artwork hasn't necessarily like changed because of COVID, but there's some things that are kind of happening there where I feel really glad that I chose this kind of like medium to work with in the future, because it could be used for things like mental health and you know, like battling ageism and helping out with seniors and that sort of thing, and the lack of accessibility. So it sort of seems like there's that we have kind of somewhat of a responsibility in a very like lighthearted way, but we have this opportunity to be able to do something really good and healthy for the world and society in general.
Yeah, in some ways, the opposite's also true, that immersion allows you to escape from yourself and in everyday life. But on the other hand, as we were talking about before this panel began, but we all are excited by Zoom and the ability to connect. And I'm sure we're going to end up on the other side of the pandemic in a much more hybrid world. But we were talking about all of the various VR immersive collaborative spaces. And, you know, we all know the power of creating volumetric media to connect with other people, to create empathy. And, you know, that can also work in these kind of real world, real time spaces. And I just think we'll see much more in, you know, both in kind of everyday life in terms of meetings, but also in creating, you know, VR theater and other kinds of collaborative work that way. And I just think everyone will be more open to it, audiences as well as creators.
Any other thoughts on what the way that COVID is impacting your work, or also, I mean, whether you're sort of like refusing to let it impact?
Honestly, I've been working in digital production for my entire career. So the only difference really is I'm not going into an office anymore, and I'm working from home. But I'm fortunate that I'm able to, I have the type of work that lends itself really well to working from home. And I've always sort of been like a little bit of a shut-in, so it hasn't really changed my social life that much either.
Good.
I love what Andrea was saying just about the opportunities for collaboration, like true collaboration right now. And also what I think Katrina said about the idea of looking at it as a constraint, as an artistic constraint that will open up other kind of avenues for you to explore as a storyteller or whatever. And I mean, oral history is really close to my heart. And like, I'm working with some other people in my community just to do some oral history projects with our elders. And you know, that we're just using Zoom. You can like pull out the audio stems from it, you know, it lets you work with that. So the possibility for podcasts is really great right now too, you know, just really exploring with, you know, like Andrea was saying, just like people's own footage and just kind of swapping that and having community curated projects.
Fantastic. Well, we're a little short on time. I don't want to keep us too much longer, but I did want to give you all an opportunity to share if there's anything that you're working on, or a new project, or an expansion or extension of the project that you have in the mix of the film festival, to sort of plug that so that we know what to look out for on the horizon. Or if you're at a place where you're just taking a vacation now, that's appropriate too. But yes, please, let's take the last few minutes to maybe share a little bit about what's next. So maybe we'll start with you, Casey.
So the plan now is to continue on with production for Wanaza Kyoke Sea Visions, and to start building our team. We've solidified a programmer who's really proficient with Unity and Unreal as well. The current Unreal update is just like, it's too powerful to ignore, and I'm really excited to like start to get into that. And hiring an animator in the future, and kind of just like re-solidifying our pipeline and workflow. It's all going to be done remotely and that sort of thing. So that's kind of the plan right now, and we're just kind of waiting for the Canada Arts Council to approve this grant. We have some like final reporting to do for previous grants before we can get that, but that's one thing that we're really looking forward to right now. In addition to some other sort of VR projects and residencies that I've been involved with. I just finished the PXR Performance and Extended Reality Festival that was kind of a joint venture between Vancouver and Kingston, Ontario, and the Immersion Exchange program right now, in addition to being in school. So busy, but exciting.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Samantha.
We are still currently raising money, partially for distribution across Asia, and also partially to buy a generator for the kids on the island. We'd also like to arrange for a trip for one of the Yellow Boat representatives to go and show the kids who inspired the story, the finished piece, of course, when it's safe to do so. So we're still waiting on that. As far as personal projects go, I'm working on a series that sort of straddles education and fine art, about how animals and different creatures perceive the world. I got the idea for the piece after reading a white paper about frog perception, how they only see things in motion, and I thought it could be interesting to explore how different animals see the world. I don't have a name for it yet, but that's what I'm working on.
All right, Amy, what about you? Oh, you're muted still.
Not enough sleep, not enough coffee.
Cheers.
Just trying to finish up a piece for Embodied Labs that I wrote about social isolation in elders, and we're in the editing period right now, and so excited to see what that's gonna feel like for subscribers. And but on a personal level, just kind of working on this oral history project and getting ready to launch a podcast in the near future, hopefully, with a group of sisters that I work with. And just, I think most recently, project that I just released was an interactive map for Arbaeen Walk. So you can go to this map and you can click little flags along the route. And it's kind of a community project. So people submitted their own footage from their phones or whatever, and anything they wanted to write about it, and we put it up on the maps. And so it follows walkers between the years of 2014 and 2019, so the different flags represent different years. And so that was a fun thing to do as a collaborative piece. So I'm just looking forward to more collaboration in the future. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Brian.
Yeah, I've gotten really interested in exploring AR, specifically because of the accessibility and democratization issue, right? Everybody's got, not everybody, but billions of people have smartphones, and that could be really a way to interact with this content. So testing that out sort of as a long-term side project, I've been involved with this podcast, Bad at Sports, which is an oral history of contemporary art practice that's been going since 2005. We've got so many, like 800 hours of really in-depth artist interviews. And so what we've been using is we actually created Bad at Reality, which is an augmented reality app where we're using drawings to trigger animations as well as audio from our oral history archive, and then place them in environments where they can interact with each other, where different themes, both visually and auditorially, can interact in this space. And so we did a sort of pilot test of that just wrapped at Hyde Park Art Center here in Chicago as part of Artists from Chicago 2.0, because a lot of those artists were in our catalog with sort of installed images. Also covered the building and hand-painted murals that trigger the AR experience. Got it in a few magazines, and even on a Mars Brewing beer can will actually activate the AR app. But we really kind of see this as a beginning. I think the possibilities of AR are even earlier in their storytelling potential and figuring that out, and based off of seeing how people can interact with it is potentially a really great way to bring 360 and these types of things, storytelling, to a much larger public.
Amazing, thank you. Peter, what's next on the horizon for you?
Yeah, so this is, as I mentioned, a long docuseries, and so we just have got an award from AT&T and a grant from the Flamboyant Arts Fund to complete the series, and so we're really excited to finish editing the episodes we haven't finished yet, and then really give them all, beautiful sound design and color correction, and then hopefully bring them back to Puerto Rico so the artists can see them. Some have, but not all. And then also we'll be able to donate headsets that are preloaded with the film to a few different museums. And then I also just finished a flat documentary about the Jewish community in northern Ethiopia. And we also shot VR while we were there, and keep hoping to turn that into a film. My editor is across the Canadian border, so we have not been able to get together yet. The computer's here, she has the hard drive there, but hopefully soon we'll be able to start post-production on that project.
Amazing. Andrea.
I just also finished a number of projects related to COVID and to immigration policies under Trump. So it feels like now that hopefully things will change a little bit, it kind of feels like a breather after 4 very intense years covering that issue. So, right now I'm kind of wrapping those up, and looking forward to more collaborations, hoping to work more with Katrina. We'd had planned to go to Halifax this year at some point. It still hasn't happened. The community there actually got hit pretty hard by COVID. They lost a number of members. So hopefully next year, I hope we can go and have like a community screening for people there.
Amazing. And Katrina.
Well, speaking of personal work, I just started a personal essay film, a flatty documentary about narcissistic abuse as being under the Me Too umbrella of types of abuse. And I've been connecting with other women virtually who are recovering from those types of relationships. So that's been a really healing way to process my own emotions, anger. And then I'm in the beginning stages of putting together a deck for a virtual reality film that would be a psychedelic artful experience of what it's like inside the clitoral orgasm. So it would be an educational, experiential piece with sound, haptics, and visuals of that. So
amazing. Well, I am just so pleased to have spoken with all of you today and to have all of you here. It's been such an honor. So I just want to thank you, each of you, for your time and for sharing your insight and amazing work with the New Orleans Film Festival and our audiences. So thank you all so much for this panel.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you for such a great program.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Awesome show. It was great to meet you all.
Yes.
Great to meet everyone
Yeah,
and hear
nice
about
to
your
meet
work.
everybody.
Great to meet you all too.